Before we get started, there's a couple things we really should talk about when getting this cable track set up. So, number one, the table must be square. Make sure your table is absolutely square within a 32nd of an inch when you initially get this set up. Otherwise, you'll run into some issues when you're trying to run your table later as things are permanently fixed to the table. All right. Number two, your table should be level. Now, I'm not saying it has to be absolutely perfect in terms of leveling. However, as I've also already said, things will be permanently attached to that system. And if the table isn't level, it will show up as problems later on. And lastly, number three, the table should be tightened and fully assembled before we start putting on the cable track. So make sure your entire system is tight and put together before we attach the next portions, because the next portions will be permanently attached. I can't say it enough. So with that, let's go ahead and break into getting the table set up with the cable track. All right, so when you initially set up your table, you would have assembled C brackets like this that attach to the Y-axis. So once they're bolted into the frame, we go ahead and use the self-tapping screws provided to then attach that C bracket onto the Y-axis rail. And you're going to do that for both brackets, or all 4 brackets, or all 8 brackets, depending on the size table that you have. So pay attention to how many you have, and it will be first all set up on the left side, and then onto the right side if you have a 5x10 table. But only on the 5x10 tables will you have more than 4 of those brackets. So keep that in mind as you're working with this. Next up, we're going to go ahead and permanently affix that X-axis cable track tray to the X-axis gantry. Time to get that jacket off, and we're going to go ahead and grab 2 clamps. These are quick clamps here, and they're really useful when setting up this cable track initially. So I'm grabbing 2 of them there, and what Bobby is doing there is setting up that tray so that it's just underneath the cable track, the gear track there. So it is setting just underneath the gear track, and we're clamping on the 2 sides of this X-axis tray in order to make sure that everything is set up correctly. Once we have clamped those down, we like to run and make sure that the X-axis doesn't make contact with the cable track tray at all. If it does, we'll have some issues running our table, and we don't want that to happen. So we run the X-axis back and forth to make sure that we're not hitting the X-axis cable tray while we're working with it. Once it's all set, we'll go ahead and attach that tray to the X-axis rail there. So as you're gonna see there, it's probably good to have someone help hold the rail as you're attaching these. And then we're gonna go ahead and speed a little on past, because the next step of all of this is essentially doing the same thing over and over. We do like to double check that the X-axis is not making contact with the X-axis cable track tray there, but regardless, let's go ahead and speed this up. We're going to attach each of these, double checking that the X-axis doesn't hit, and we attach on the ends as well, making sure that again it is in line with the other parts of the track tray, and again attaching those. Awesome, we're all connected. Let's go ahead and remove those and add the next tray. Now the next tray has a set of 4 bolts that come in the kit. What we do is we lock into that little rail there, those clamps brackets that we put on earlier. We're going to go ahead and attach directly into those, and that is the bracket. Next up, we're going to go ahead and feed our motor on the opposite end, on the opposite side of the table, and we're going to feed that motor wire through the gantry. Now you can do this before or after setting up the table. Some people opt to before, others do after, and then we're going to go ahead and pull it out the other side. Have someone else minding that cable. We're going to pull it all the way out. All right, fantastic. Now we're going to take the X-axis motors, the Z-axis motor wire, and the floating head switch all off of that aluminum Z-axis and feed it through the cable tray. That cable chain there, and that is set. Feed it all the way through. Next, if you don't have these ends already affixed to your table, we're going to go ahead and attach the ends, and we use those quick clamps to then secure and make sure that all of those ends are seated when we're building the end piece to the cable track. All right, let's go ahead and take a look there. I'm going to try to push those through. Looks like there's a small fitment issue there, so what Bobby's going to do is take those screws there and actually run it through those holes and make sure that we're able to then attach those parts to the cable track tray. So Bobby's going to go ahead and attach those there. Looks like he's having a little bit of difficulty. He may end up just taking a drill just to open up those holes a little bit, as the powder coat looks like it was thick there when trying to assemble it all. So keeping that in mind, we're going to go ahead and finish assembling all of this here, and looks like he opened up those holes there. Perfect. Powder coating can get a little thick sometimes and a little inconsistent from our powder coater, so sometimes you will need to open up those holes just a little bit in order to make sure that you're able to work with the system here. Okay, and let's go ahead and attach the other end of that cable track to that tray that's coming off of the X-axis carriage. Attaching those, bolting them on. It's pretty basic bolting there, nothing crazy going on there. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that is all it takes to assemble that part. Now we're going to go ahead and feed the cabling through the Y-axis. All right, and looking at the Y-axis, we're just feeding all those wires through, feeding all those wires. There are going to be small variations when it comes to what we do with the next part of the Y-axis, depending on how you want to configure your table, but the same rules apply there. We're just feeding wires through. Now, if you want to attach the, run the plasma work torch through, you're going to need to undo all of those clips. However, many people just opt to not do that. And if you have questions on how to undo all of those clips and piece them back all together, we can address that in another video. For the most part, we just run our cables right through, and we're going to attach the ends. And again, using those clamps to make sure everything is tight as we're attaching those ends, because they can be a little bit hard on the hand if you're trying to work with them by hand. Attaching and now bolting that to the X-axis cable track there. Perfect. There we go. Let's keep moving on. We're going to fix the other end. All right, looks like we don't have an end, so we're just going to go ahead and piece those on. We clamp those red dots in there, and then we push the little flats, the little pieces that cover the middle, together with the clamps, and we bolt the final pieces on. Perfect. And from here, once they're all bolted on, you can go ahead and run through the rest of the setup videos and look into more of wiring the motors into the control box and testing your tables out for the first time. If you have other questions, please feel free to reach out to the support, and we will gladly walk through any other questions you may have. With that, have a good day.